Okay, I hope you're seeing Ivan the Terrible. Are you all seeing Ivan the Terrible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we have to get the Russians into Alaska, and we're going to start at the very beginning when Moscow was just a little principality in the shadow of Novgorod, had been suppressed for 2 centuries by the Mongols. And the Mongols had used the Tatars as tax collectors. They would go to Moscow and demand tribute. So Moscow had to be collecting tribute from their citizens. So they were suppressed. So when it says independence, Moscow was finally got out from under the yoke of the Mongols or the Golden Horde in 1480. So that's the starting point. Go. And they were in the Pacific in 60 years. It's quite amazing. We talk about our settlement of the West, but they were even quicker. And their incentive um, uh, was fur. So this is their Daniel Boone, famous guy, memorialized. But these were the cutting edge guys. So let's just go back to that map. Here are where the Cossacks are farmed from. The Cossacks are from the swampy lands just before the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So the Volga River and the Dnieper, the swamplands down there. So they were a motley bunch and still are, by the way. So
Hey, John, can I ask you a question? Can you go back to that map? Out of curiosity, where is the border of Finland on that map? Finland's next to Russia these days.
yeah, I think it's up in here.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Sorry for the digression. I was just
No,
interested.
no, that's what we're here for. I welcome digressions. Okay, so Cossacks, but they had resistance. That land wasn't empty. Turkic tribes were there, the Tatars specifically, and their kingdom was the capital was Kazan. And the Russians had to fight their way, many a setback. This was a big one where the armor that the Russians used just sank them deeper into the swamp. But they finally made it and came back and bought furs. All these fabrics, of course, were riches they traded from China, but the furs was what the Russians were after. And so let's jump ahead. They expanded. This was their core. They expanded in the brown area pretty quick. So we're focusing on the red area, which started in 1689. And why 1689? Because that was the year that the Cossacks, who were controlling Ukraine, decided to leave the Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth and throw their lot in with Moscow. The red represents what happened after the Cossacks did that, the additions of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great. And what we're interested in is Alaska. So how did they get by these parts were added by 1801, and that's where we're going to zero in on what was going on and what got the Russians here by 1801. By the way, Siberia was also inhabited by Mongols, not just Turkic tribes, and they were more subdued by then. Of course, they had been the source of Genghis Khan's great triumphs, and the remnant of that effort was the Golden Horn, which ruled the Principality of Moscow for about 200 years. Kurosawa made a great movie about the Mongols and the Russians coming together called Dersu or Zala. I highly recommend it. All right, Peter the Great. He got the Russians to Alaska, started the journey to Alaska. Let's talk a little bit about what he did in the West. Before he sent Bering to the east, he established a new city in the swampland that was going to become St. Petersburg. Had a Swiss engineer help him build a Russian toehold in the Baltic. They didn't have anything going on before they built St. Petersburg in this swampland. Where is this? Our love of maps. Here's St. Petersburg, built on a swampland that finally gave the Russians access to the Baltic Sea, and Peter the Great had the Navy built, ships built. I don't know if you remember, but as a young man, he had traveled incognito to Holland and apprenticed himself to a shipbuilder. So he was quite a guy, and he created this window to the west at St. Petersburg. And of course, we've talked before about these islands when we were talking about the Crimean War. Just a few words about an interesting little exclave, Kaliningrad, sitting right here. And boy, oh boy, is this of interest now. With Russian aggression and their good buddies, what's his name? The dictator. Well, Belarus has a dictator who's buddy, and so it's just a short march across the southern Lithuania to Kaliningrad, this is a geopolitical sensitive area in particular now. The history of Kaliningrad, yeah, Michael.
Well, I just wanted to compare it. I said, even though by size it's not comparable, I think of Canada, and then there we have Alaska. Here's a part of the United States which is not contiguous, and in Hawaii. The idea that there's I don't know what you want to call it, but it's this part of Russia as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe Alaska's an exclave by that definition. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, good analogy. So Kaliningrad, interesting history. So you had the Crusades, and the Crusades finally burned themselves out. around the end of the 1200s, and they came back. The German knights came back, and they wanted to go on another crusade. And where were the nearest heathens? They were the Balts. The Balts were the last to become Christian, and the Teutonic Knights marched east and conquered the Balts and made their capital city Königsberg. It evolved into the capital of East Prussia under the Prussian monarchy. It was an Enlightenment city. Immanuel Kant was born there. Red Army captured it from the Germans. The Potsdam Agreement made it official, created Kaliningrad. Kalinin was a ceremonial head of state of the Soviet Union. And the German population was expelled after 700 years almost of residing there. They were ethnically cleansed, and that's what happens to Nazis. Now let's look east. That's where our focus is today. So Peter the Great sent Vitus Bering, a Dane, in 1725, sent him east to prove that there was a separation of Asia from North America. That was unknown at the time. So off he went. He had two expeditions, and this shows where he took off from. It goes up here. Gets here in 1728, so proves that there is a separation. Comes back. Along the way, he names things based on the Russian saints on the calendar and the dates that he arrives, and we've seen that with the Spanish as well. Like San Diego was named on the feast holiday when the Spanish first arrived in California. So this shows it more clearly. The green is the first expedition, shows the separation. So now the appropriately named Bering Strait. Then there's a second one that takes off and actually goes along the Aleutian chain, finds this big island, Kodiak Island, and that's going to be their headquarters going forward, this big island here, the Kodiak Island. So really goes through the Aleutians pretty well, but not without danger. So here is the sinking of one of Bering's ships, and who wants to be out on the sea on this particular night? Looks pretty grim. Yeah, Bob.
I've got a trivia question for everybody. Where's the most eastern part of the United States? Not most western, but where's the most eastern part?
Alaska.
Old trick question. The Aleutian Islands.
Yeah, well, one or two of the Aleutian Islands, exactly. But they've moved the date line around it, but it's still east, still in the Eastern Hemisphere.
Yeah, so it's the farthest west and the farthest east and the farthest north.
So the answer is Alaska, 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 Hawaii.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay, so this is a National Geographic map, but this just shows what I want to illustrate: Kodiak Island, and some interesting places. I'm going to be spending most of my time talking about Sitka. Later on, Juneau's going to be become a capital of Alaska. Skagway later on is the gateway to the gold rush. Um, uh, what else on this map? And all this here, and what makes Sitka so strategic is that this is the inner passageway. So this is a protected waterway, protected first by Vancouver Island, then protected by other little Canadian islands. And then this is the Panhandle, which now belongs to the United States. And the Panhandle is where the action is. There's a great maritime economy here. All this is protected. Great fishing. And of course, cruise boats go through here now, surpassing fishing for as income. But Sitka is going to be the capital of Russian Alaska. This is just another map, a little nicer, I think, but shows pretty much the same stuff. So the capital is moved to Juneau in 1906 based on what happened in 1880. Anybody know what happened in 1880 in Juneau? They had a little gold rush. There was a strike right near here, Juneau, and that's why Juneau was placed and became the capital. In fact, though, Skagway was really a gateway to the Yukon. And before we go to, I want to say something else about Skagway, but the land was not empty. There were Athabascans on the interior. They weren't on the coastline. That was another tribe. But they were on the interior, the Athabascan language. And here's the interesting thing. The Athabascan language is also spoken down here because of the nomadic wanderings of Navajo and Apache south. So they speak Athabascans language. And so do some tribes on our California coast and the Oregon coast. Go figure. But the Tlingit is who we're going to talk about mostly because they controlled this inner passageway. They had a nice culture, totem poles. Yeah, Jim.
Just a couple of comments. People, you showed the migration of the Athabascans to New Mexico or modern day, and it's unclear whether they came down through an ice-free corridor or along the coast. More archaeologists now think they came along the coast. So the coastal Oregon linguistics tend to support that. The other thing is I would comment that Greenland is north of Alaska and Panama is south of Hawaii.
Ah, okay. Good pearls. Tlingit girls, they had a sophisticated culture. So this is just the basket weaving, matrilineal. But the thing, and we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago, potlatch. Potlatch is the giving away or destroying wealth to demonstrate a leader's wealth and power. It's also redistribution, a leveling down. And it's meant to reaffirm first family, then clan, and then international connections. And William Seward, when he went up to Alaska for the first time, did not understand what potlatch was and messed up big time. So it's also a connection with the supernatural. And where does it take place? In the leader's big house. And here's Edward Curtis. He was an intrepid photographer. Many of you may have seen some of his photographs of Native Americans. But he got, as he was able to do, into inside a potlatch ceremony. So this is the potlatch dancers and singers. A Tlingit funeral. And then one day they look out and they see ships. What the heck? And the alarm goes out. The Russians land and create a foothold 6 miles from the future Sitka. And they think they have an agreement with the Tlingit to stay there. But 3 years later, the Tlingit have second thoughts, and you'll see what happens. The guy behind the move to Sitka was Alexander Baranov. He was the prime mover from very humble origins, but he was the guy that organized and got the Russians to Sitka, or Novo Archangel. Initially. So 3 years later, in 1802, the Tlingit attack and slaughter the Russians. I think 2 or 3 survivors. The Battle of Sitka. And the word goes out, we're rebelling. But Baranov organizes a Russian counterattack. There's a lot of good otter fur up there in the inner passage, and he comes back this time with more ships and also Native American recruits that are not Tlingit and maybe don't like the Tlingit. So the Battle of 1804, and they take Sitka, build a fortress. They also build I think the Tlingit village was up here on top of this hill, which is now called Castle Hill. And when we were there, there's a nice climb up there, a nice view of the bay and Sitka. But Tlingits attacked again, and they lost, and they fled. But that was a two-edged coin, because the Russians really relied on Native American know-how to trade, to have people to trade with for food. So seafood, you could get that, but that got kind of old, and so the Russians, without good relations with the surrounding Native Americans, were in trouble. And we'll see what they do later on. Every once in a while, a ship would arrive with supplies, offload furs, and the geopolitics of this particular moment now, 1804, the Spanish finally realized that the Russians were a threat. And that's, if you remember back, that's why Carlos III sent Portola and Junipero Serra in the first place up to Alta California from Baja California. They'd been in San Diego 230 years before, but now the Russians are coming, and so we got to get back up there, and so that's why Portola and Junipero Serra were funded for their movement north. Remember, it wasn't just in Alaska. Peter and Catherine had made moves into Ukraine, and the Russians were perceived as being aggressive. Imagine that. Serra and Portola, where we left Serra, and we'll go back and get them quite soon, I think. But in 1769, they had made it to Monterey and Carmel. Spain was claiming, though, over before the Russians got there in 1740s. The Spanish had claimed all the way up. You'll see that on a map. And it explains why there are Spanish place names. And we encountered the Malaspina Glacier while we were on our cruise. Of course, there was Valdez, which is famous for the oil spill. This was part of it, and here's what Spain was claiming. Now look at the colors. Spain is brown. We see Britain in this shade of tan. We see an expanding United States, Louisiana Purchase. Fort Ross makes a brief appearance. Here's America and Britain fighting over Oregon. And here is Russia. They've established control over the Panhandle. And we defeat Mexico in the Mexican-American War, and all this becomes American. Goodbye, Mexico. And now we're about ready to buy Alaska. So Russia leaves, no more pelts, and that's where we're going to stop the clock. So just catch our breath. The lay of the land in 1803. Here's the Louisiana Purchase. This is all Spanish territory. Oregon is no man's land, a three-way race between America, Russia, and Spain. And then Lewis and Clark coming into no man's land to see if it's worth pursuing. Meanwhile, Captain George Vancouver is exploring the Inside Passage for Britain. The British fur traders are there big time. Here you see them trading, but the Russians are going to leave as soon as the fur is depleted. A peek into the future. Two more rushes besides the fur rush that the Russians missed out on. If they had waited a little bit longer, there would have been the Klondike gold rush, which was the real deal. The gold rush in Juneau ran out. It was very small. But then with the Klondike gold rush, as I said, Skagway was the gateway to the gold rush. And if you got grandkids that like to watch good movies, this Call of the Wild with Harrison Ford And then Jack London's follow-on novel, White Fang, Ethan Hawke essentially plays a young Jack London. You can see that. Both of these movies are good for grandkids, and which we showed our grandkids. We traveled with grandkids on the cruise to Alaska. So the gold rush, there's this famous picture of them going up from near Skagway. We were at the base of this in summertime, and our grandson caught a nice salmon fishing at the base of this pathway. The other rush is the oil rush, and here's the pipeline we've heard so much about. Alaskans get an annual paycheck, their cut of the oil revenues. And then, of course, there's the infamous spill in Valdez. And also, we hear periodically the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is a point of contention with the current administration. Not sure it's going to stay a refuge. So back to the Panhandle and Sitka, and the fact that America has done so well begs the question: and do we have the Midas touch? 3 years after we conquer California, there's a gold rush. To add to the gold rush in Alaska. So back to 1804, we're getting to the love story part of the program. Here is the counterattack. Here is the Russian village, and again, they're running low on food. They don't have any grain, and they're getting tired of seafood. So what do? They send a count, and of course it's got to be a count, right? It can't just be an ordinary guy. But Sitka's starving, and Count Rezanov in 1806 leads an expedition to San Francisco, and he's going to propose to the commandante at San Francisco Presidio, our own Presidio, that the Russians buy grain from California. It's unclear how much grain is actually being produced by the Spanish at that time. It was pretty much a cow economy. The currency was cowhide. But after he makes that offer to the commandante, he also allows that he'd like to marry the commandante's daughter, Conchita. Conchita stands for Maria de la Concepción Marcela Argüello. So Arguella is the magic word. And she lived from 1791 all the way to 1857. And here's why Arguella is the magic word. Where Homer and I went to medical school right here, at the base is Arguello, and I think Arguello Boulevard, when we were going there, actually continued up. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it intersected Parnassus.
And it was there the steepest road in San Francisco.
What's that?
Arguello, dropping down from Parnassus to Irvine.
Yes, exactly. That's what I remember walking up that damn thing. So it continues on the other side of Golden Gate Park and skirts the Presidio, unsurprisingly. Yeah, Bob.
Why do you have a German umlaut over a Spanish name, over the U, which would change the pronunciation from Argüello?
Yeah, I don't know that. I saw it and I said, well, that's interesting. I'll duplicate it without understanding it. So any Spanish students here? Okay, something to investigate for next week. This story has lived on and by romantics in America, and more importantly, there are more romantics in Russia than there are in America, and you'll see why I say that. But a history buff friend of mine who lives in Benicia gave me a book, and there's illustrations in the book, and this is meant to be Count Rozanov arriving from Sitka, and this is the welcoming party at the Presidio, presumably. This is a mural at the Presidio in the chapel there, showing Conchita and the Count. And this is another depiction of what might have been. But there's a problem, a big problem, illustrated by this red line. They're both Christians, but she, being Spanish, is of the Roman Catholic faith. And he, being Russia, is Russian Orthodox. And there's some problems with the church. They need to get some kind of waiver for these two lovers to marry. So the only way is for Rozanov, after he gets back to Sitka, to go and ask the Pope for special dispensation. According to the story, that's his destination when he is stricken on his way back, barely getting out of Siberia, at a place Krasnoyarsk, and he dies there. Of what, we're not sure. But he's gone at the age of 43. And here is his statue that Romantic Russians have put up. And on one side of the statue, the Count says, "I will never forget you." And on the other side, Conchita says, "I will see you never more." And these two lines are taken by the Russians, put into poems, and ultimately an opera. And it's also put into a novel by Gertrude Atherton. And in this account, she becomes a nun, Sister Dominica, in Benicia. Some sources say no, she went to Monterey, but that is flat wrong. And the Russian opera continued that myth, which is not correct. It was our own, I say our own Benicia because I meet there with a group of doctors every Sunday. And we know Benicia. And walking the sidewalks of Benicia, I looked down one day and I saw Conchita in a tile on the sidewalk. And if you ever get to Benicia, here are the cross streets, First Street and K. You can see the Count and Conchita as a young maiden. And then when Rozanov doesn't come back, and she doesn't know why, there's no way of her finding out that he's dead, but she waits in a nunnery, and she waits and she waits. And this is the story that Gertrude Atherton puts to pen, as does Bret Harte. This is the name of his poem, and of course it's a poem of unrequited love. You can hear it read on YouTube. Here's the address if anybody is interested. She was buried in the cemetery at the top of Fifth Street in Benicia.
Oh my goodness.
This is why she's got a tile on the sidewalk. And in 2007, the sheriff of Benicia took a handful of earth from near her tomb and arose to Rezanov's grave near where his statue's located. So there are some romantics in America. I went up there looking around. I couldn't find that exact gravestone, but I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked. So there you are, Benicia's part of this love story. On the Russian end of things, they had a famous poet who Robert Lowell called one of the greatest, and he was part of a new wave that came with the Khrushchev thaw, his poetry. And he wrote about this love story, and it was turned into a rock opera in 1979 and reproduced on national television in 1983 and taken to Paris in the same year. It was called Avos, based on the name of the ship that Count Rezanov took down from Sitka to San Francisco. Then it became Juno and Avos because there was a second ship. And just some scenes I could get on the interweb from the rock opera. 30 years she waited, unrequited love. These are from multiple presentations of the story. So here you go. The U.S. tour in 2020, it was supposed to go up in San Francisco on May Day of 2020. But COVID gave us a second tragedy on top of a tragedy squared. So no Conchita and Rozanov for America. This is an epilogue. They had a special broadcast kind of reviewing the whole phenomenon of the rock opera. And here's, I found a version with subtitles. Here's the very moment where they get it wrong about Monterey. The sheriff came from Benicia. So misunderstanding between the United States and Russia. I won't go through, well, I'll go through it really quick so you'll see the extent of this epilogue. It's quite lengthy. So, a beautiful hymn to love, and I think that's a good place to stop. Oh, here's where I actually need to stop. Rosanov's legacy, where is this?
That's Fort Ross.
Fort Ross. 6 years later, the Russians are down in Fort Ross. Based on Rosanov's report, it was thought to be a good place to head south. But in 1806, Rezanov was at our Presidio, and Fort Ross isn't that far worth a trip. All right, so questions.
Well, didn't we hear Putin allude to Russians' interest in reclaiming Alaska when he met with Trump recently in Alaska?
Yeah, the gold, the oil, yeah, the regrets, the sellers' remorse.
So it isn't just Belarus and Poland who should be worried. It should be our Alaskan friends.
Yes, yes.
And just one more point. You left out an allusion to Homer, which is just north of Kodiak Island, the town of Homer, Alaska. Just wanted to give it a mention.
An important footnote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Didn't Putin visit the graves the same day after meeting with Trump? The graves of some Russian or Soviet wartime dead.
Oh,
what was that? Did you see that, John?
I didn't, and I don't know. The Japanese did bomb the Aleutian chain. I think the very last island in the Aleutian chain. I think we had an outpost there, and the Japanese took it out. So the Japanese did bomb American soil.
That has sorry, I'm going to speak up again. That crosses over with my own family history. My father was a test pilot in World War II, and a Japanese Zero crashed in the Aleutians, and the Americans recovered it before the Japanese could destroy it. So, of course, they rehabilitated it and had our test pilots fly it, one of them being my father, to learn about the strengths and weaknesses of the Zero. It was called the Aleutian Zero. And my grandson, Miles, who flies radio-controlled planes, came to the field, and someone came out with a perfect model of the Aleutian Zero, which my brother recognized, a model of the very plane our father had flown.
Wow.
And he learned, incidentally, if you want to know, it's very quick. It's very lightweight. It doesn't have much armor. The gas tank is right behind the pilot, so bad place. And if it goes into a dive, it starts to shake badly and can only pull out, I forget if it's to the right or to the left, but it can only go one way. These are all useful for pilots of our planes to know. So that was a little story of the Aleutians and the Japanese invasions in World War II, incursions.
Well, we happen to have among us an expert in war airplanes. Michael, take it away.
Yeah, I just read an article that has photographs of that plane. It's one of my aviation history articles, and it shows the plane in flight with American insignias on it. I think they took it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, which I just recently visited. One of the other things they discovered is it didn't have self-sealing fuel tanks, which meant if a bullet pierced the fuel tank, there was a good chance it would set the plane on fire. So very early on, they started coming up with various strategic ways of countering the Zero, which up to that point was thought to be very formidable and difficult to match. So yeah, and I've got photographs. This article, I don't know if you're interested.
I'd be very interested.
like Homer, you ought to come to the Aviation Historical Society and talk to them about your father doing this, because that's fascinating stuff.
I lived 4 years on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, as a matter of fact, growing up.
Well, I was just there 2 weeks ago. At the Air Force Museum, which is next to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is a fantastic museum. I mean, probably takes 2 to 3 days to really go through it in depth. But yeah, that Japanese Zero was recovered, and then your father got to fly it. Wow.
Yeah.
We should have you. Do you have photographs and other stuff, memorabilia of that?
Not of the Ocean Zero, no. It's just my brother, older than I, knew the story. I was kind of young.
Oh, well, that's a fascinating story, because up till that point, we thought they had the best airplane in the world, and we were trying to figure out how to match them. So that's a great story.
Like your sweatshirt.
Wonderful stuff.
Yeah,
See,
Air Force. Here's the Air Force Museum.
Oh. Well, not to dilute that wonderful story, I'll just add that I'm looking at the Times of India report on Putin's visit to the Fort Richardson National Cemetery near Anchorage. This was only 2 weeks ago. The world has turned 180 degrees since then, where a dedicated section honors Soviet airmen who died in Alaska during World War II. The white headstones inscribed with the names and ranks of each pilot commemorate those who lost their lives while training or ferrying US-made aircraft to the Soviet Union under the Lend-Lease program.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous.
There was another fascinating story. And some of the women would fly the planes north up to Alaska, where they'd be transferred over to the Soviets. And then the Soviets had to fly them across the Bering Sea. And it hasn't really been told too much, but they had to then fly the entire length of Russia to get back to the Eastern Front. So, I mean, some of the pilots in the Soviet Air Force died up there, presumably when they were trying to ferry them out of Alaska.
Well, it's ironic that Putin had scheduled and found time to make that visit to the tombs of Soviet airmen, when, if you recall, in the first administration, our president didn't have time to make a similar visit from Paris a few miles west to the tombs of US Army or wartime dead, because it was raining at the time.
Right. And his heel spurs were bothering him.
They would in the rain, wouldn't they? Come on.
And he doesn't like war in general. This is
for suckers.
Yeah.
I just put in the chat an explanation about the umlaut or whatever in
I
Spanish.
saw that. Yeah.
Let me see. Well, yes, but that's where you have to pronounce it and separate it from the E, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah.
Which we shouldn't be doing for Argüello. I'm being pedantic.
We can be pedantic on this.
Such a surprise.
Among friends, yeah. All right, well, this has been very fertile. Next week, we have a very special presentation. Our friend Pepper, who has been multitasking, and it looks like he made it through the formal presentation while taking a bike ride. But he's gone now, but he will be leading next week. He's somehow been invited to give I don't know if it's grand rounds at UCSF, but some important talk on psychedelics, which he has been going to school on and practicing. An interesting retirement project of his. And so he's going to give us a presentation, the newest and latest that he is going to dare to present to the academic community. So I figure if it's good enough for UCSF, it's good enough for us. So we'll have him next week, and we'll play it by ear the week after. I will have just gone through my reunion big weekend, and I don't know if I'll be able to come up with something. So once again, I extend the invitation. A couple of you have expressed concepts of a talk. Is that what Trump said about his health care plan? So some of you have expressed some interest in giving a talk. So 2 weeks from today would be a wonderful time to do that. So any other comments?
I did, the fact that Putin visited these graves, this is the first time I've heard of that. I mean, did anybody know about that? I didn't hear that.
Well, I did hear it as a theme that he wanted to emphasize how minor the Western Front was in World War II compared to the Eastern Front, how it was really the Russians that stopped the Nazis, that defeated the Reich. And what we were doing in Normandy was very small potatoes compared to what was going on in the Eastern Front. And that's been a theme for some time now.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I can't remember. It was advertised. Well, I shouldn't say advertised. It was announced on TV that before he met Trump, he was going to do that, or after he visited with Trump, he was going to do that. I can't remember which way it was, but he had planned to do that before he left Russia on his way to Alaska.
But were there any?
As you say,
I've never
it was
seen.
all-
Are there? I'm sure there are, but has anybody seen photographs of him visiting this graveyard? I haven't.
I'm sure they exist. I'll take a look as soon as.
Yes, I'm looking at a video right now. I'll send, and he's he's laying flowers and he's making a sign of the cross in a very beautifully maintained military war museum there, obviously maintained by presumably the Federal War Graves Commission, if there is such a thing. So I'll send the link to John.
Is the graveyard near the air base that they met at?
It's at the Fort Richardson National Cemetery near Anchorage. So that's not quite Sitka, is it?
No, but
No, well, they met at Elmendorf.
Sitka wouldn't have
Oh, they
had.
met at Anchorage. Excuse me. Yeah.
Sitka would not have had the infrastructure for such a meeting. Trust me on that one. Yeah. So I'd be remiss if I didn't state Ramsey's position on the relative contributions of the Russians versus D-Day. And he has some slides on the casualties of Stalingrad. And then there was a second battle in Ukraine that was even more casualties. We hear about Stalingrad all the time, but there was a second battle in Ukraine. And I'll see if I can. I'm sure I've got the slides that he's used. I'll try to run some of those down, but it's quite impressive what the Russians paid in lives and fortune. Of course.
Well, I think it was a very topical place. I think it was the Battle of Kursk.
Yes, the Battle of Kursk. That's right.
After which a nuclear submarine was named, which sank in 2000 or 2001. An awful tragedy, which was Putin. I think Putin had only just become president when he had to deal with that disaster.
Where did it sink? Was it the Baltic?
Yeah, or maybe Murmansk or somewhere like that.
Okay.
In the Arctic.
the way, can I tell you
Or
a day in history?
Please.
It was on this day in 1945 that Japan formally surrendered to the United States, marking the end of World War II. It was a gray, overcast day. The surrender took place on the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, and witnesses later said that from the ship they could see the sunken wrecks of Japanese ships all around the harbor, left over from American bombings. General MacArthur came aboard at about 9 a.m. A few minutes later, the Japanese contingent arrived. A Navy chaplain delivered an invocation, and a recording of the Star-Spangled Banner was played. General MacArthur read some brief remarks, and then the documents were laid out for signing. The whole signing ceremony took about 10 minutes, and it was carried out in silence. When it was over, MacArthur said, "Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world and that God will preserve it always. Though these proceedings are now closed." And with that, he walked off the ship without having ever formally acknowledged the Japanese men who just surrendered to him.
And you remember how they were dressed? They were dressed super like they were in tails and starchy collars and
Yeah.
yeah, it was
They had their formal military. And yeah, the other thing I heard was the guy from Canada who wasn't a highly commissioned officer. When it came time for him to sign the instrument of surrender, he signed on the wrong line. And the Japanese, when they saw that, started saying, "No, we're not going to sign this." You know, they were going to say, "Whoops, he signed on the wrong line. We don't acknowledge it." And apparently there was a little kerfluffle, and somebody said, you accept it as it's signed. But this guy, I forget his name, was forever known as the guy who signed on the wrong line on the instrument of surrender.
So, Michael, why is there such a big celebration in China today of the Japanese surrender? And I haven't heard of it being celebrated in Washington. I probably missed it. But why China today? You know, where they're all meeting, a huge military parade.
I didn't hear of that. No.
Oh, there's the gathering of about 30 or 40 world leaders. Not the usual lineup in Beijing today to mark 80 years since the Japanese surrender.
and
Putin,
Modi,
Kim Il-sung with Modi with a huge number.
yeah.
Well, the Japanese had invaded China. I mean, for them, it may be very important that
Yeah.
they were defeated. That is, the Japanese were defeated. And
How are we marking the day in the United States? Are we?
well, I just read you that today's the day they signed
Well,
it.
that's such a day in history. It was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's probably just another little ditzel on the calendar as far as we're concerned. I mean, we had actually dropped the two bombs almost a month earlier. Well, actually, not quite a month earlier. And they have, as far as I know, officially surrendered August 16th. But this ceremonial signing of things was a whole month after, or at least 2 weeks after they surrendered. So, I mean, at the time, VJ Day, as it was known, I think was considered August 16th. So I don't know that we celebrated. I mean, at the time we celebrated VJ Day, but in the succeeding 80 plus years, it's faded into obscurity as we all drive our Hondas and Toyotas and Mazdas.
Do you know where the USS Missouri now resides?
Is it up in Washington?
No, at least when Iko and I were there visiting Pearl Harbor, it was parked within sight of the Arizona. You know where the
Sank.
where you go and pay homage to the victims of Pearl Harbor.
Well, remember for a while it was in Sassoon Bay. In the mothball fleet.
Was it?
It was.
Yeah, it was out there. I don't know if you could have taken your little rowboat and rowed out to it, but it was being kept there for a while. There were three, I think it was three, what do they call them? Wisconsin class battleships. One was Wisconsin, Missouri, and there's one other that were commissioned during the war. They used them during the Korean War, at least one of them. And by then it was evident that battleships had pretty much gone the way of the buggy whip.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there are no more naval battles that are fought with battleships, if there are naval battles at all.
Well, you and I were talking recently about the great movies about Midway, and
Yeah,
I'd recommend the latest movie Midway. Really high production values. Oh my God! And the Chester Nimitz is played by Woody Harrelson.
yeah,
Go figure.
yeah.
What's the name
So
of the movie?
I think it's Midway.
yeah,
Thank you.
that's
Okay,
all this great
guys.
history.
This has been great. I think we found an interest in the military history here. We seem to have in common. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so anyway, anybody just keep in mind anybody just bulging with interesting facts.
Is Aiko giving the high sign?
Step forward. Yeah, Ica's. Uh, okay.
Uh,
All
Thank
right.
you,
all right.
John.
See you
Thanks
guys.
a lot, John.
All right. You bet. Bye bye.
I was recently, can you hear me, John?